Um, Welcome back to another episode of Interfaith Miami podcast here at FIU. We are honored to have Yasemin here, who is joining us, and she's part of our Muslim-Jewish dialogue, and she's a local faith leader and a Muslim theologian. So we're very honored to have her as part of our scholars. She's also a professor here at FIU and teaches courses on religion in the Department of Religious Studies. So we're very honored to have you here with us. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and your background.
First of all, I'm very honored to be here. I think this is a great idea. So thank you so much for inviting me on this show. My background. So ethnically, I come from the Middle East, Iraq, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, add a little sprinkling of Armenian, and then we found ourselves in the United States when I was about to start college, and I have been here, but I've really lived in 3 continents, 6 countries, and 7 states within the United States for a very long period of time, and I spent 28 years in the Arab world, another 5 years on top of that in Turkey. I was in Germany, I was in England, and in many different places. So I was exposed to a lot of different things, and I can say that throughout the course of my life, I think I've definitely, the one consistent thing that I can say about myself is I've always been very curious about being a seeker of truth and what that looked like. But what that looked like for me in my early days was very different than who I am now, but I'm grateful for the transformation.
So talk to us about your spiritual progress.
Okay, so I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I was born and raised there, and my parents, unlike most non-Saudis, who used to go to American schools, British schools, French schools, etc., foreign schools that were tied to embassies. My parents decided to put myself and my brothers in Saudi schools, Saudi Arabian madrasas, hardcore Islamic schools, where we studied 5 different Islamic subjects every single day for 12 years. And it was very strict, it was highly segregated, it was very serious, and it was, it inculcated a certain understanding, a certain flavor of Sunni Islam. Typically today, I'd like to shy away from labels, but unfortunately we live in a world where when you use language, you have to really use labels too. So very loosely, it's, Wahhabi or Salafi kind of ideology towards Islamic practice. And so that was my upbringing. And then I came to the United States, and all of a sudden I was exposed to freedom of thought. And I didn't quite know what to do with it initially. I was overwhelmed, and I had a very brief, I would say, agnostic period. And then I found that didn't really satiate me. I couldn't make meaning of it. I couldn't understand or grapple with the idea that something comes from nothing. I couldn't make sense of a world without grand design. And so there are many different atheistic tendencies that didn't sit well with me. So I sought the truth at that time, and incidentally, and this is a very important story because it changed the course of my life. When I was 19 years old, one of my friends, who actually wasn't even Muslim, from college, gifted me a book. It was called The Essentials of Rumi. In Saudi Arabia, all the books of Rumi at the time, not now, at the time, were banned. So I grew up not knowing anything about the poet, philosopher, theologian Jalaluddin Rumi. So when I first picked up the book, and this was pre-internet generation, I had no idea what it was. And the gentleman, the boy who, the guy who gave it to me, he was just a normal friend. But when I opened and I started reading some of the poetry, it felt initially like it was a love between a man and a woman. I couldn't understand why he would give me this book. But then I quickly understood that it was actually the love between a human and the divine. And I that really struck me because, you grew up in a theological tradition that teaches you fear.
Right.
God is something that you feared. God wasn't necessarily something that you loved.
Mm.
And I was like, wait, what do you mean love God? Who loves God? You fear God. And so I decided to go on this quest.
Mm.
And I have been on this journey since I was 19 years old.
Wow.
Of what it means to be in a love affair with the divine.
Okay. And so you're also an Islamic theologian. What does the study of Islam bring to you?
So, even that has taken me from one step to another. Where I started isn't where I am right
Okay.
now. Even in my own beliefs and my theological evolution. Initially, after I became a seeker of truth of this divine love, I would again have to use some labelings. I was very interested in the Sufi path of Islam, but I was inculcated in Sunni Hanafi Islam. Those were the tendencies or the terminologies that I was raised with, and so initially I was sort of pigeonholed within that. So my world view I felt was still quite narrow.
Right.
So I drew upon Sufi ideology, but I was still, I would say, stuck with Sunni Hanafi Islam.
Okay.
And I can say that quite confidently now because I feel that I've broken those boundaries.
So what unstuck you?
So what unstuck me is I felt that there was a need for us to create these cages for ourselves because that's what felt comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's how we were raised. It was in our environment. It was our social structure. We had created these self-imposed restrictions. And I felt that, if God is limitless, then why can't we expand our worldview and see things from other people's perspective? There's, we have a world at the time, now we're probably over 8 billion. At the time it was, younger, less, but then the more you travel, I've traveled to over 70 countries, and you go and you see so many genuine people who grew up in different environments, different families, right? Whether they're Buddhist or even Hindu, things that were so alien to me. We was like, oh, Hindus are just idol worshippers. And you go into their temple, and when you focus on the form,
Right.
you might actually say that because,
Right.
You see the elephant and the snake and the monkey and so on and so forth. Same thing I traveled all over the Far East,
Mm-hmm.
right? You see different forms of Buddha,
Right.
laying, standing. They look different, whether it's Taoist or Shinto
Right.
or whatnot. But then I realized something very critical, and this is my latest journey, which is when you focus on the form, things can take you to a very restricted place.
Right.
But when you focus on the meaning, you can very easily, or at least I was very easily, able to understand what it really meant to say we believe in the oneness of God.
Mm.
And to me, that no longer means believing in the oneness of God, meaning you don't have statues in front of you that you worship. Believing in the oneness of God, to me, means that there's everything manifests from it, and in the essence of all is one. The essence of all creation is one. And so even my traditional Islamic identity that was very much focused on rituals and community, I really felt the need. It was suffocating me. I felt that I had to break those barriers. And I say this as a Muslim theologian, actually, because my worldview of a Muslim theologian, in my understanding, is a very inclusive,
Right.
adaptive, ever-evolving worldview of what Islam ought to be,
Right.
not necessarily what we see the form being presented today.
So you have a very unique perspective, I think, within the
Very.
Islamic tradition.
Very.
I mean, what is the reception by other Muslims then?
Oh, generally, I don't, I try to, as an academic, you have to know your audience.
Sure.
So sometimes I take a different approach. So depending on where I'm at, if I'm invited to speak at a mosque,
Right.
I try to gauge, depending on the conversation. Sure. I have to be harmonious with, and congruent with my beliefs. So it's not like I can't say that I say something I don't mean,
Right.
but I have to use a language that my audience is able to understand. And so sometimes I don't approach subjects that I feel that my audience is not receptive to, or I'm not really invited there to talk about those subjects. So I keep a lot of my thoughts, unfortunately, to myself, because I feel that the receptiveness level is actually very low. There are very, very few people. You certainly would be one of those very few people who I can sincerely say that I would be able to express my Islamic beliefs in a way where I don't feel like I would get any backlash.
So, are there any spaces? I mean, you've traveled all over the world. So, are there any Muslim communities where you feel the most sense of community, where you're able to fully be yourself?
So I would say more than a specific country, I would say where I felt the most safe to able to sort of, or a community that where I felt the most compatible with is a community that I joined, loosely joined. It's not really a club, but it's sort of a community in Istanbul, led by a lady. Her name is Cemal Nur Sargut, and her outlook, her world, her Islamic worldview really resonated with me. She took me on a path of this thing that's known in Tasawwuf called the nothingness, hiçlik, where you lose yourself and it's a very philosophical way, and it's very hard to do it justice in this form, but it's a way where you really go on this journey through different stations to fade away in your love of the divine. Now, I'm very much aware that I am a human being. I'm a mother. I'm a spouse. I'm a daughter, and I have daily responsibilities. But I feel that if you really know how to stretch those spiritual muscles, you can genuinely live in that hal stage, whether you're cooking or driving or working. You really can. Is it easy? No. I think it's very difficult, because we're human, we're fallible, and we can get angry. But at least I have a destination. At least I'm making an effort to stretch those muscles in every instance or every moment of my life.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've that's been something that, growing up in the United States, I think American Muslims kind of think of themselves as being exceptional in many ways. But in terms of, I think, the diversity and complexity of Islamic thought, I think, at least from what I've seen, American Muslims are definitely not at the cutting edge. I've seen some very, going to even places like Pakistan, which you wouldn't kind of think about. But there's some very interesting discussions I've had in Lahore and like Istanbul and many of these other parts of the Islamic world where you're really, you're in the thick of sort of Islamic culture and ideas, and you're actually able to be very generative. Whereas I think, in the United States, I think there's just a lot less, I think, knowing of the diversity of the Islamic tradition. And then being a minority, you kind of feel, especially after September 11th, so for the last, 25 years or so, being in a state of kind of having to defend your religion. And so then there's very little space for diversity of thought and sort of opinion and things like that. So
I couldn't agree more. I can only speak for South Florida.
Yeah.
I've definitely had a lot of engagement with Muslim community in all the 7 states that I lived in, because I was always a seeker. I was always a seeker of truth, and I would try to go to different, congregations and mosques and, so on. I can't say in all honesty that there's a single Islamic center here in South Florida that is anywhere near where I would feel safe to be able to examine some of those ideas at all. But do I go at least on a weekly basis? Absolutely. But I go for the camaraderie. I go for the community. We go because we have book clubs and children have activities and so on. And those are where my friends are. Do I go there for intellectual thought? Absolutely not. And what I sense and what I've observed is that the Muslim community, maybe here in South Florida, maybe I can generalize, I don't know, is that, how sometimes people convert to Islam and they become so protective over what they know. I even remember one time having a conversation with Cat Stevens, oh my God,
the singer,
the singer whose Muslim name I just forgot right now. Will come. I can't remember. Anyway, it'll come back to me. So I remember meeting him in Dubai, and we had spoken. And
Yusuf Islam.
Yusuf Islam. Thank you. We were where we came from. What he told me about his journey. And I feel that a lot of Muslims in the United States are also like that. They're so insular, and they want to protect. They want to protect their mosques and their community and their traditions and their practices. And the reason why I say they, even though I'm Muslim, is that I can no longer relate to that. It's come to a stage where I genuinely feel like oftentimes I have to not go to a Friday sermon or not go to a khutbah and because I have to protect my ears so that I can protect my heart. It really impacts me a great deal. And I feel that I feel so incredibly disconnected. I can't overstate it enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I felt, that's why I think it's been, for me, what's been really remarkable about the interfaith work, like working with different faith communities, is that you're able to see very different perspectives or insights and have spiritual discussions that you're not necessarily able to have within your own community. I think with the Jain community has been remarkable working with them, because ideas of nonviolence, for instance, just remarkable, or the idea of plurality of perspectives, right? Anekantavad or aparigraha, sort of the idea that, we don't want to, the non-acquisitiveness of sort of living a life without sort of desiring or attachment. They're really remarkable aspects that I don't think are things that don't exist in Islam, but these are ideas and thoughts that have existed in Islamic history, in Islamic philosophy, in Islamic theology, that are just not either known to American Muslims, or for some reason they don't see it as relevant at all, because that sort of separation between the mystical and the legal, like the focus is all on the law and just sort of observance of the law, rather than understanding the spirit and sort of the nature and the mystical aspects of the religious tradition.
Very true. And that's actually one of the main reasons why I chose to focus. When you go into a PhD program within Islamic theology, you have to focus on one of the 4 tracks. You can't just do everything. And so I focused on Islamic law and jurisprudence specifically because I found it to be so incredibly problematic. I found that, even within the Muslim tradition, this idea that the Quran is protected, but then that translated to Hadith is protected, and that translated to Fiqh is protected. And I was just like, well, no, I don't know who told you that and who made that claim. And so this static rules and regulations that is cookie cutter, that somehow it needs to be universal and applied to all time and place has actually no basis in this Islamic theology whatsoever. And yet it's a slapstick approach,
Right.
and it's behooving to me, to be honest with you. And so one of the reasons I went into it is because I found it so incredibly problematic.
Right.
And I really felt the need to study it so that I can have a more formed discussion about these subjects.
Right. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your spiritual journey. Two last questions.
Sure.
One is, in terms of the interfaith work, why do you think it's important? What do you hope to learn from it?
So I think that my understanding of interfaith work used to be where two people from different traditions come together and each one says what they want to say and what they believe, and then we have pastries and everybody goes home, and then we pat each other on the back and say, you know what, we're like really swell people who just we're so open-minded and we got together. I think that we're fooling ourselves when we do that. I think that real interfaith work is when you genuinely make every effort in trying to imagine their truth as being yours. And that's a very difficult thing to do. But really, it's interfaith work often, and I've been in lots of interfaith work, especially after September 11th, where you're really just there to try to convince the other person of what you believe. And I don't believe that that's interfaith work. I think that just two people just having a monologue. It's not real dialogue. I think, but it's very difficult. What I'm saying is also very difficult because human beings, even if you belong into the same tradition, right? Even if you're two Muslims or two Jewish people, right? You filter knowledge and information through your own life lenses. And so my hope through all of the efforts that you're making and FIU is making in the Jewish Muslim dialogue is for me to genuinely go to these gatherings really trying to understand somebody else's truth. Genuinely try to really embody that truth, and also hope that perhaps I can share some of the truths that I see as well, and hope that they may be able to, because ultimately the idea is that if we can really have that compassionate understanding of each other, then perhaps we can go home to our families and to our communities and communicate other people's truths to one another. And that's when, real change hopefully can happen, so that we can live in a much better world where we live in a lot, in harmony and safety and pursue collective love and happiness that we all human beings seek.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. Last question. What is your message to future generations?
Well, I would say be a good person. I know that sounds really cliche and very general, and somebody might say, well, what does that really mean? I believe in a journey of towards excellence in whatever you do, in character and conduct. Ultimately, those are the two litmus tests for how we measure ourselves. So the advice that I give to my children would be the same that I give here today, is that really elevate your character and conduct. Be the best version of yourself. Invest in whatever God-given capabilities that you have to serve humanity in the best way. Uphold universal truths and really believe in the power of goodness.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Yasemin. It's been an honor and a pleasure having you and working with you, and looking forward to many, many more conversations together.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot. Okay.